Hello there, Ciel here. I'd love to tell you this story of Skeleton Woman. This story was first given to me by Alberto Villoldo. I was a student at his light body school, and it was a story, the myth of soul retrieval. Through trauma, often the soul fragment will leave in order to stay safe. This can happen in this lifetime or an earlier one. And it's possible to bring those soul fragments back. I invite you to enjoy this story, this legend, this myth. Skeleton Woman. The sea began to churn. A wild wind blew up. The sea was crashing on the shore of the small inlet where the people lived in their ice houses with their kayaks. They were a hunting people that lived very close to the water, nourished and fed by the water. But this storm was a wild storm, and it was breaking away the ice houses, bringing them out to sea, and even some of the kayaks were lost. The storm lasted for more than a day. When the storm subsided, the villagers looked around. Was everyone still here? And they found that although the village was barely intact, all the villagers but one was with them. The one missing was Anouk. Anouk was a darling of the tribe. Her sled dogs she had herself tamed from wild wolves. And when Anouk drove her dogs on her sled, it was like she was flying like the wind. Her whole countenance lit up and radiated, and Anouk was gone. The villagers gathered together to mourn the loss of Anouk and to ask the sea god, can you give her back to us? And for 3 days, her wolves howled, and the great drum was hit. As the people cried and wailed, asking for Anouk to be returned. On the 4th day, Anouk had not been returned to them, and in their grief and mourning, they packed their belongings that still remained into the remaining kayaks and paddled away to find a different inlet that wouldn't hold the sad story of Anouk's disappearance. And they set up their new village far away. That inlet was left. Nobody came to it. Anouk was forgotten. And then one day, a fisherman, a lone fisherman in his kayak came to that inlet, wondering why no one was there. It looked so promising for catching fish. And he let out his line. All day long, he did not have a single bite. And as the sun was nearing its completion, just setting, he decided to pull in his line. And there he felt the tug he had been waiting for all day. It was a mighty tug. And as he pulled in, he wondered, what great fish have I caught? And the sea began to froth. He heard distant wolves howling. And again he thought, never have I caught a fish so large. Perhaps it is a walrus or a whale. And he pulled and pulled, and the sea frothed more and more, and the wind blew stronger and stronger, and the dogs howled more and more. But he did not want to let go of his catch. When he finally got his line nearly to his boat, he saw he had not caught any fish. His line had hooked a skeleton, and that scared him. what was this skeleton rising up out of the water behind him. And so he quickly started paddling towards shore. And as he paddled, clickety-clack, 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 the skeleton came behind him. He made his way to shore. His boat was on the sand. He grabbed his dear precious fishing stick, because that, of course, he could not leave behind. And he ran towards a little ice house. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. The skeleton came with him. He finally got to the door of the ice house, jumped inside and closed the door behind him. All was still. Then he could hear the howling of those wolves and the whipping of the wind. He lit his candle, and there he could see the skeleton on the floor around him. He nearly went back outside again until he heard those howling wolves. And then he thought, it's only a skeleton. It can't hurt me. And he began to have compassion for who was this being, alone like him. How long had it been alone? He began to untangle the bones of the skeleton from his fishing line and setting them all in order. He worked tirelessly for hours. Even after he had untangled his line, he then removed the barnacles from the bones and the seaweed tangled up in the bones, and laid the whole skeleton out on the floor, covering it with the fur. It was time for him to get into his sleeping furs and go to sleep. And in his sleep at night, he dreamt of who was this being that lost their life to the sea. And great waves of compassion came into his heart, and tears streamed down his cheeks. Anouk sat up, wondered who was this man crying, and not to waken him, she crept very quietly over and put her cheek against his tears. She could hear at that point the boom, boom of his heartbeat. And as she heard the beat of his heartbeat, she began to sing a song to his heartbeat. Flesh, flesh, flesh. Lips, lips, lips. Hair, hair, hair. And she sang herself back into a beautiful young woman, the Anouk that had been stolen by the sea. In the morning, when the light began to penetrate through the ice house, the man opened his eyes and, much to his surprise, found a beautiful young woman sitting next to him. She took his hand and led him outside, and there around the ice house were her happy, yelping, nearly wild wolves, come back to greet her and kiss her and jump on her. Anouk and the lone fisherman, neither of them alone anymore, stayed in that inlet, had a family of their own, fished and hunted with their dogs, and lived a long, long, long life together. The soul can be retrieved. It can be fleshed out. It can be reunited and integrated. I invite you to take into your heart this story of soul retrieval. Thank you.